Hello and welcome to the Microfocus Inspire Break the Bias panel. I'm Sarah Atkinson and I'm the Director of ESG at Microfocus, and I'm going to be the host today. So, in celebration of International Women's Day this year, we are going to be examining how we can break the bias. And I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by my panelists. Melissa Bessie, who is the Global Ecosystem Strategic Partnership Lead at Accenture. Laurie Lewis, who is the Executive Senior Director, App Services at DXC Technology, and Gabrielle Ferguson, Coach, Talent Development and Inclusion Specialist and founder of Gabrielle Ferguson Consulting. So, first of all, let me say we are going to be hearing about the personal journeys of our panelists. We're going to discuss the opportunities and actions which could really help our industry become more diverse, equitable and inclusive. And we're going to be shining a light on bias. We all have it, but how can we better understand it and how can we overcome it? We're also going to explore how IT can better attract, recruit, develop and retain not just female but underrepresented groups today. So let's get started. So my first question, and I'll go to Melissa first of all, is can you share a little bit about your career journey, if you've experienced or witnessed any bias, and how did you overcome it?
Sure. First off, thanks for having me. Very excited to be on this panel with this esteemed group. I always enjoy good discussions around topics that impact us every day. So appreciate the invite. My career journey has been with one company. It's kind of ironic to say. I've been with Accenture for 31 years. And most people, in this day and age would say they've worked for many more companies than that. I'm fortunate because I'm in a services company where people are at the heart. We're the only asset in our company. And I've been fortunate. I work in our strategic partnerships now, but I have had the opportunity to work across all of the different businesses in Accenture. We've been talking a lot about in Accenture, our one Accenture experience. So I was fortunate to be in our consulting. I was also fortunate to be in our BPO businesses. So in some of our managed businesses we do for our clients. They've all been obviously centered around helping our clients. And now in creating, I'll say, differentiated and innovative capabilities with our partnerships, right? How do we unlock those partnerships to really advantage helping our clients with their business opportunities and challenges? Along my career, I've had a lot of biases. I started in engineering school. There was a 1 in 7 ratio back then. And, from the idea that an engineer drove a train all the way to, my first client experience where I was on a shop floor and we were doing, believe it or not, a barcode to make sure all the pieces went into the final assembly of a helicopter. Along the way, you experience bias, from the, client individual who says, oh, you're just like my granddaughter. Oh, how are you working on this team? And like, what value do you have to add? It's not negative. It's just they have this image of, all the way to being a global tech executive. I think it was really interesting. We were on a panel talking about International Women's Day last week. And there was this riddle, and it was a riddle that asked if you could solve it, and it was for minds from Mindspace. And I'll just, I'll probably ruin it, but I'm going to tell you what it was, because I thought it was very pivotal, because I think you encounter unbiased, you encounter it all the time, whether you even intend to or not. And the riddle was, father was taking his son for his first job interview. They're in the parking lot. The phone rings and the CEO of this trading company says, good luck on the interview, son. Who was on the phone? I don't know what all of you guys think, but they asked this question to, I don't know how many people, and everyone had a really hard time coming up with the answers. And the video gets into, oh, did they do a pre-recorded thing? Was there some AI call and all this? I don't know if you guys know who was on the phone, but it was Mom, the CEO. And there's that implicit bias that you think it's a male who's on the phone. I've heard it done the same way with a doctor where, oh, I can't operate on this person because this person's my son. And they're all like, how's that your son? You just like, it's this, we have, whether we realize it or not, our mind goes to certain places. And so I think, overall, I would say throughout my journey, I have found both unconscious bias, but I've also found it not to be either, right? I think it's all in, we're a product of our experience. And all of those experiences help form our views on how do we really create an inclusive environment for our teams. Being in a services organization, it's a huge challenge. Obviously, when I started with Accenture, there was 30,000 people. We're at 700,000 people. And actually, one of our core values set from the CEO, who happens to be female, so happy that's in the 5%, is that we will be a 50-50% gender neutral. And how do you create an environment that will all thrive? And so great topic and super excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Gabs, tell us about your personal journey and experiences of bias. How did you overcome them?
Great, thank you, Sarah, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. My journey in HR began roughly 10 years ago. So finishing university, off into the HR world, and moved from learning and development and organizational development into more kind of talent management and performance management and succession. So always a real interest in people, what makes people tick and what makes people successful at work has always been an interest of mine. Naturally, diversity and inclusion comes into play when you're working on those kind of talent processes. It should be woven into those processes more naturally than perhaps it has been before. And also started to look at employee engagement to overall look at what is the employee experience. What does it mean to work at this organisation? What do we stand for? Which are those kind of questions that keep me up at night and help me get up in the morning as well. So my own personal experience of bias might surprise you. So being female on this, I know I identify as female, and being Black British in terms of my ethnicity, I actually found the more explicit and direct bias that I have experienced was more to do with age and seniority, which might surprise you. So I, pride myself on being an ambitious, hardworking individual. My career really accelerated. I got into roles where I had a degree of influence to shape things, fairly quickly. I'm good at what I do and passionate about it. And yet there was a cloud of suspicion about whether I really deserved to be there. And this often came into play with, but you haven't been a manager for 20 years. So what new can you tell me in terms of leading in my role? I'm a specialist, I'm trained in this. So there were often questions around that and questions around, if I was deserving of promotion and should I not be satisfied with where I was due to being younger, always being probably one of the youngest in the room. So I think that's really shaped my passion for this topic, to inspire companies and individuals and leaders to do better and also to pay it forward. If I can make the way a little bit smoother for those that come after me, and really share that journey and share what I know, I think that's something that's really worth getting up in the morning for.
Great, thank you. I'm really looking forward to hearing more tips and advice from you, Gabs. Thank you. Now I'm going to go to Laurie. Tell us about your career journey and experience.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. It's very exciting to be part of this panel. And I think it will be difficult for us to keep to our time because there's so much amazing experience that you have just with the four of us here on the line today. So I'm Laurie Lewis. I work for Dxc Technology, and I have actually, similar to you, Melissa, I've been sort of with the similar company for my 40 years. If I can't even believe I've been in this for 40 years, that's insane. anyway, especially since, again, like I told you, I'm only 35. I don't know how that happens. But anyway, I have had an amazing journey in my career. And actually, it's been super, super fun. Done some very cool things. And but sort of the bedrock of my value system came from Hewlett and Packard. I actually was one of those few people who actually met Hewlett and Packard way back in the day. And I still have the rules of the garage in my office because they're still tried and true. And I see I've kind of taken those things and carried them forward in other organizations that I've worked for. It's certainly within DXC Technology. I love the people I work with here. The things that we do for clients it's actually what fuels my heart. Purpose is important to me. So it's nice to be working for a company that has a great purpose and is really helping to change the lives of people and communities and the world and through great technology. So in my 40 years, I have certainly experienced a lot of different biases. I remember back and trying to think about, okay, what are some of the early things that I discovered or actually made note of? And one of them was this idea of micro inequities, and which is a form of discrimination or biases coming through as discrimination. And I remember early in my career being like the only woman in the room, right back then. And everyone giving their presentations and so forth, and me standing up to do mine. And all of a sudden, everybody's just like looking at their laptops and doing their work, not paying attention. And that's that's an example of an inequity that many people just aren't even aware that they're doing it. Today, they're looking at their phones, right? Or they're, just not paying attention. And it's an active form of discrimination and disrespect, all of those sorts of things. But I remember that specifically. I've had the scars of, getting out there, being bold, and where I've seen discrimination and, reported it and losing my job. So there's that. Not super fun, but it happens. But you still have to, and those things, they impact you, and they form your they impact you in lots of different ways, and just recovering from something like that, right, is a big journey in itself. But the other thing I also have been able to discover is that I have my own biases. That I've had to be that have come to mind as well, where I go, gosh, I had no idea that I even had that bias, right? And so I think that when we're talking about breaking the bias here, it's all of us. It's not just gender. It's any differences that we have as people, and that means like it's endless, it's infinite, right? Because we're all uniquely made and constructed. And so just taking that first step of being aware and taking responsibility of yourself first to understand what are your biases, how do you overcome those biases, right? And and then continue to always check on that, because our biases are formed by the experiences that we have. Whether it's structured or unstructured, they're based on they're kind of that mindset that we have that is also formed through the education, whether it's again formal or structured or unstructured, could be on the job, but just the kind of those life lessons. But all of those things collectively determine what our biases are, and it's important to frequently be checking to make sure that those biases are, that they're accurate, that you're, or if there's something that needs to be changed, that you take the action to change that. So.
Well, thank you so much, Laurie, especially for sharing your personal story there and really kind of teeing us up, I guess, into the next part of the conversation. So I'd love to know a bit more about some of the solutions, what your organizations are doing to try and address bias. If you've personally been involved in any initiatives to help address this issue. So Gabs, let me come to you now and get your perspective on this, please.
Absolutely, thank you. My specialism really lies in this sense of belonging, which is one of the new areas in the world of diversity and inclusion. And I was recently responsible for designing, developing and implementing a program all around belonging. And I think what's really important is to understand why this works. So to borrow a phrase from Simon Sinek, start with why. Why are we doing this? And I think what's really important when you look at any program, because the best program in the world cannot solve behavioral issues. There needs to be a real desire and appetite for change. And so I think it's very important first to dig into the why. Why are we doing this and what are we trying to achieve? And most importantly, I think the best question to ask of all, and trying to think of a solution, is what happens if we do nothing? If we do nothing on this, where will we be in 1, 3, 5, 10 years time? What happens to our competitive edge? You know, as businesses and organizations, you're competing for talent, for customers, to retain your colleagues and employees that you already have. What happens if we do nothing? And when you have that really clear picture in your mind, you can then work backwards and look at the real solution. So the program that I was recently delivered, my approach to things is normally a mixture of pragmatism and courage. So let's be really brutally honest about where we're starting from and what we really can influence and what that foundation is. But let's be courageous enough to push the boundary on that and paint a picture for what things could be, and creating a solution based on those kind of aspects. So this program was focused on behavioral change, and we framed it as belonging because that's something that everybody can understand. So while we all hold different various characteristics and backgrounds and experiences, to Laurie's point, every single person in the world can identify and understand what a sense of belonging feels like. We've all had that experience, hopefully, but we also have all absolutely had the experience of feeling that we do not belong. And I know which one I prefer. And we all, you know, every single one of us then also has to take that responsibility that we impact the sense of belonging that other people feel. So that was really the starting point for this program of work. I wish that I had half an hour to talk you through the whole thing. But I think starting with those questions when framing solutions and tapping into something that can appeal to everyone, not just those that hold different characteristics, is really crucial, especially as we move into the new modern world that we're living in.
Excellent. So much. Thank you. That was really insightful. So, Melissa, let me come to you now. Tell us a bit about what's happening at Accenture here.
Sure. So first, Gabs, I'm very excited to say that we just published our Better to Belong research. So I was like, okay, good. We're in the right area. I think couldn't agree more that right now, like never before, right? Because I think we all have gone through so much over the last couple years with the pandemic. We now have what things that are going on with Russia and Ukraine, and you just have this sense of, you know, I think Laura, you said purpose as well, right? So there's this, I think, you know, what I've really enjoyed from the new generations of workers is their willingness to champion things of purpose, willingness to champion things like say no. Like I came from the more of a generation of, you know, you'll just work, you'll figure it out. Lori and I probably have had more experiences where we're the only one in the room. And what we're doing at Accenture really is we're calling it the omni-connected experience when you're not a products company. So I love your Hewlett Packard because, right, there's a different heartbeat to a company that has a product than a company where their assets are individuals. And when we talk about this omni-connected experience, we're really trying to say that everyone feels included, connected, and the sense of belonging. So we've kind of put those three things together, and we've divided it actually into, I would say, three areas that matter the most. And if you do this, you can have a 5x return in getting the potential out of people, right? I think in all of our jobs, right, we're all aware of everybody now, really thinking, am I happy? We've done a lot of great partnerships, but in this whole method of like better to belong, we're really saying that you need to support people at the times that matter, right? So there's a whole set of times when people enter their job. They're either onboarding, they're leaving, they're transferring, they may have had to take some time off. So that, are you supporting people in the times that matter? Are you leaving them net better off every day? And then we have this framework that's called the net better off framework. And it really focuses on 6 dimensions, and it's around mental, it's around financial, emotional, rational, physical, and even employable and purposeful, right? So there's these 6 dimensions that when you're able to do that, right, and foster that every day, and we actually have it down to everyday experiences. Like, how do you really foster that? You basically are saying you put the right people at the table, which is the diversity piece. You're having access to equitable experiences, because it is all about experiences, right? It's now this omni-connected experience. And then if you create this thriving culture, then people feel like they belong. And so I'm happy to say that, like good consultants, we've sought consultants. We have a great partnership with, for instance, Ariana Huffington and Thriving Minds. And it was funny, we watched this course over the pandemic because, as consultants, we had a very different work life. All right. You were always going to the customer. There was always this perception if, your client was paying for you, you needed to be there. So there was a mobility to our jobs. There was this, also this team collaboration, right? Because we don't have a product that we're just selling, right? We are sitting here trying to figure out how to help a company with their business problem, right? And this digital transformation, this need for all these companies to transform so quickly over this pandemic, that transformation is still happening. But I think what we were able to do with some of these programs, right? I even saw this Thriving Minds, which was, take care of yourself too, though, in this equation, right? Because we were all thrown into something, no one expected. And as you started to think about it, now we're thriving together. So we even have workshops with some of these great partnerships where we're literally doing it as a team. How do we thrive together, again, to feel like we're all having, I want to call it, when you use the tech and the human ingenuity part, you're not only having people seen, they can contribute, but I think the key word is equally have quality experiences, because I think that quality experience, that piece is what we're trying to get at. So I've seen this own evolution from, take care of yourself, figure out all of that. But now that's still not enough. You got to take care of everyone else. And I think, as you just said it, how are we going to take care of else to create this sense of belonging? And I always want to call it this equitable quality of experience for all. And you're only really achieving that, when you really are creating that thriving culture. And I think those are the kind of things we're trying to implement at all levels.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's great. Laurie, tell us a bit about what you're doing at DXC.
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of different things that are happening at DXC that are pretty cool around diversity and inclusion. There's one program that I think is super cool, and it's really about neurodiversity. And we have a program called the Dxc Dandelion Program, and it's part of our social impact practice. And what it is, it was actually the genesis of it was that is this understanding of neuroscience and neurodiversity, and especially people that have autism, ADHD, or dyslexia, realizing that they see the world differently, they think differently, and that's all good. Actually, there's some really great, cool things that they are able to do that many people, other folks, cannot do. There was some science that showed that people with that are, with this neurodiversity are better at seeing details and noticing slight changes in things. And so we worked in conjunction with a couple of universities several years back on this program to really onboard these individuals, find career opportunities for them in the world of testing, for example. So if you think about testing of applications, or testing requires a lot of being able to be very specific and notice these slight changes or these details. So we found that they had this natural gift for and this aptitude, and so that we were able to form really a practice around it to help, again, bring them into the IT industry, use those unique skills that they bring, and then create that the right environment for them to, and support structure for them to really thrive. So that's one of the programs I'm really most proud of in our company. We certainly have other diversity sort of awareness programs. We've got groups of, like, for example, we have workplace just for women in technology. We've got guilds for also different types of diversity. We also, another thing that we're doing, which I thought was super cool, and actually I've heard that Apple does it. My son works for Apple, and so he told me about this, that but they is looking at our hiring practices and looking beyond, looking beyond sort of the traditional hiring practices and people that you might target to come into your company, but looking at people that are not only just diversity in terms of gender, but also people that are just newly returning to work, having been off for a while, or even retirees, bringing them back in and their experience, or even what I would call the mature workforce, which is probably, I'm part of that, but not really realizing it. But bringing them, people in to the company who have had a lot of diverse experience. They're later in their careers, but not ready to retire yet. And bringing them back in to bring that kind of that fullness of experience into the rest of the organization. So some cool things like that happening at DXC.
Excellent, thank you. And if anyone is interested to know more about the Dandelion project, I had the pleasure of talking to the leader of that project, and you can listen to that on our Inspire 20 podcast if you Google Inspire 20. Thank you, Laurie. Gabs, I've got a question for you now. So what do you think the IT industry could do differently to help increase diversity and not just gender?
Thanks, Sarah. I think there's an approach that could be really helpful here. So if you are familiar with the line, what gets measured gets done, have you heard that before? Yeah. I have an alternative for you. So we know that the tech industry is dominated by what we refer to as a majority group, right? So Caucasian, often heavily male dominated, and heterosexual as well, if we add that in, and probably not so much on the neurodiversity side. So if we have this majority group, we know that we need to disrupt that, but also encourage our colleagues who fall into that group to be allies, which we might come on to later. So I think taking a very active, systemic approach, a systems approach, looking at each aspect of the organization with the lens, what gets rewarded or recognized gets repeated. So instead of what gets measured gets done, actually look at what is the system of the organization, what gets rewarded and what gets recognized when the pressure is on, when the chips are down, as we approach the end of the financial year. So many organizations that I work with, that I know, that I have worked for, are values led and our people are our greatest asset. But actually, in reality, when it comes down to it, we need that contract over the line. So put the values to one side because the pressure is on. So if you're working in that way, a topic or an approach like diversity and inclusion will always be put last when we're looking at the bottom line. What we have to do is really get honest and use that radical candor to assess what gets rewarded here. Because actually, when the pressure is on, those are the things that people will prioritize. So if we can link work on diversity and inclusion and belonging to what gets rewarded and recognized, it will be prioritized by the individuals that it impacts. And I truly think to make a serious shift, to just really shift the dial on gender and other forms of diversity, we need to start to take that approach. We know it was International Women's Day recently, looking at gender parity in terms of pay. The rate that we're going, it's going to take 250 years. We won't be here, unfortunately, and maybe our great-grandchildren might even escape that. So for us to really shift that dial, it takes something quite significant. And I think flipping that measurement angle with targets, they're very difficult to maintain because they're heavily impacted from all sides. You have to retain the colleagues you have, but also hire in and keep everybody happy. Actually look at what gets rewarded and what gets recognized, and you'll find your answer there.
Thank you. That's very, very thoughtful, actually. Laurie, I'm going to slightly different question to you. I mean, obviously the IT industry's got a significant role to play here, but what could be done more broadly, maybe at an education level, societal level? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. So one, I think exposure is important. Okay, so what I mean by that is, it's interesting. There was a study. I live in Idaho, and we don't have a ton of people. There's a lot of communities that are, farm communities and so forth. And I was talking with the director of commerce for the state one day, and asking him about, about education, things like that. And he said they had just done a study, and it was really interesting. He said, we did a study of high school students, and we asked them, if you could work for any company in the world, who would you like to work for? Okay, and realizing, again, we have a lot of farming communities, small cities, things like that. And surprisingly, what they said was, the majority was that they wanted to work for McDonald's. Now, I thought, what? Really? And so now, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with McDonald's, okay? So to realize, okay, but that surprised me, and it made me think about, if your world is just this big, right? You don't know what's outside of it, right? And so to them, getting a really good job at McDonald's, because that's what they would maybe be familiar with, would be a really cool thing. But if you could just widen their aperture a little bit, right, to see what is possible, then I think then they would be able to experience more. And I think the more experience you have, the more exposed you are to different things, different people, different ideas, different ethnic groups and so forth, the broader your whole view is and mindset on diversity is. So I think so for me, from an education, I think standpoint, one is having that exposure. And the other thing is education around having a growth versus a fixed mindset. Now, a fixed mindset sounds like this. Well, you know what? That's just not how I'm just not built. I'm just not, wired that way. I never was good at math. I'm really not capable of doing this. This is all I know how to do. Versus having a growth mindset where your possibilities are endless. That you have a mindset of, you know what? I've never done that before, but I could learn it. I'm smart. I could figure out how to do that. Right. I could, so having that exposure to and really driving home the importance of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset also, I think, again, opens the aperture for people. It gives them the courage to be able to try different things, to accept different ideas from other folks. So I think education is huge in terms of driving any sort of change and changing any sort of biases.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. And Melissa, I'm going to come to you now and get your perspectives on the importance of allies, male allies, allies in general. Tell me your thoughts.
So when you think about allies, right, along the way, you're going to come across dynamic people of all different ethnicity, race, job experience, and all of that. And it is super important that all of us, there's just not enough mentors. So if we just took, like, say, advancing women equality, right? Because we just had International Women's Day. There's just not enough women mentors out there, right? We have to have lots of allies, and I don't care if they're women, they're men. Each one can help you because, Gabs, you talked about how one of the biggest biases you had was age. Well, as young consultants, that's always the case, right? There's always this age thing. I think Lori, myself, we've all encountered that, right? But you need an ally that says, okay, here's how to put that in perspective. Here's, to enable you to have that voice. A lot of allies that I have is, one of the things I've always found really useful in my career is to have people that you want to pattern your behavior after at all levels. And what I mean by that is, there's always a innate strength of all of us. And there was this, when I was going into the next level of leadership, there's a lot of times I would question, am I really ready for that? Does this make sense and all of that? And I would have these great allies. In this case, it happened to be a male. And he'd be like, okay, let's kind of like think about the conversation. I'm going to kind of, talk about this. And he goes, and then I'm going to ask you for your opinion. I'm going to give you that ability, like that ally, that advocate to say, I know you got something great to contribute. That started to build my whole confidence. I saw him how he handled the situation, but then it also gave me my ability to start building my credibility. So when I think of allies along all the way, that happened to be when I wanted to make the next level leadership one, right? You have to find allies, whether it's somebody who's helping you across the board with the new experiences, these different milestones in your life, right? I mean, I've come in and out of the workforce because I've had kids. I've seen different things happen. I've had different sets of experiences. I worked in some more startup ones. So when you start to see all the different experiences along the way, I needed an ally who could do a couple things. One, really listen, ask how I was doing. And I think that's our job. Like if I say to everyone else here, our job is to be good allies to people. Pick a few that that they can just come to you with no bad question, no let your hair down moments. You know how your kids, like I have 3 lovely kids. And one of the things is I always want to create a safe space where they can just let their hair down. Like they can be great, like at a class and this all happened, handle themselves beautifully, but then come home and be able to be an ally and just listen, give them, we're not in a problem solving mode. And I think that's what a good ally does is they're there for that whole facet of ones. They're there to advocate for you. They're there to listen to you. They're there to offer perspective for you. They're there to challenge you. I've always had one like, well, why can't you be that leader? Like, you can give me all the reasons why, but you haven't given me one that I believe. Like you still haven't told me why in tech you don't feel like you're going to be able to contribute to some of these tech trends because I didn't think I was innovative enough or this. So I think allies of all shapes and sizes, forms. I also think young allies are important because they keep you relevant. I know there's been a lot of education for me along, not only now my kids are getting into the workforce, so I'm starting to see that. And Laura, you said the child worked for Apple, right? You have to see the world through their eyes. So we start like that whole, how do they think and need and what do they need to belong, right? And so that's why I'd say one of my best advices is you can't do it without allies. You have to find who is your group. You can even be assigned mentors. You can learn a lot from everybody, but at the end of the day, you have to find your group that uplifts you helps you with every facet. And I will say that changes, and you should always seek out people at the next level as well, or the next thing you want to pattern your behavior after. The next thing I'm patterning my behavior after is this woman who's like, I'm going to get you into boards, right? So you start, like at least all along the one, and because I have time now, more time, like what are the things that find that ally that ask you the whole full range of questions?
Can I add to that too, Sarah? Just one real quick thing. So the other part is those allies actually help you be able to celebrate who you uniquely are. So I think about early in my career, I actually remember, and it's just like imprinted in my brain. I had a performance evaluation where my manager said, "You know what, Lori, you're just too positive." And I thought, oh, okay, is that I guess that's a bad thing, right? I wouldn't have not known that. But over the years, I was like, over the years, I actually tried every new job I had. I tried to be really serious and not smile, not share anything about who I am, and then they would last like 2 weeks. And then I had to say, okay, I'm just going to be me. That's who I am. But having an ally who says, this is what makes you unique. This is what's so great about you. This is why they gravitate toward you or whatever. And to celebrate those natural gifts that you have, those are the best allies. Those are the ones you want on your own board of directors, that they will come to you if you have something that you're dealing with in your career and you need someone who's going to tell you the truth, like those girlfriends who you say, do these pants make my butt look big? And they go, honey, it's not the pants. So you want those sort of, a board of directors, allies who will tell you the truth and help guide you through your journey. Go ahead.
Thank you. So we're coming up for time, and I'd like to just ask each of you for your closing comments, really. I'd like you to leave our audience with just one piece of advice, and that could be something that people could do personally or professionally, which would help improve the overall inclusion, diversity in the IT industry. So Gabs, let me go to you for your closing comments on that. How are we going to break this bias and drive some change?
Thanks, Sarah. I'll try and keep mine short and sweet. To stay competitive, you have to get brave. I think that's the number one thing that each and every one of us can do personally and professionally. The world that we're operating in at the moment, there is a real spotlight on diversity, inclusion, belonging, culture, all the topics that we've covered today. And so I would encourage you to behave and make decisions based on the fact the world is watching. Your customers are watching, your clients are watching, your partners are watching, your current employees are looking to see who you're filling that new leadership role with. And so I encourage you, in order to stay competitive and stay an employer of choice and maybe a partner of choice, you're going to have to get brave.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Melissa.
So love what you said, Gab. That was great. We at Accenture moved to what we call a strengths-based culture. So we all go through this whole strength-based. There's 35 of them, and I can tell you what my least ones are and my best ones are, and then somewhere in the middle. And, we really empowered everybody to kind of take those strengths of us, our innate strengths, as you said, Lori, and utilize those. So mine for you is, I couldn't agree more. It's everyone's responsibility to create this sense of belonging, because when you do that belonging, you will be not only competitive, you're going to be more productive, you're going to get the potential out of people. But I think the other piece about it that you have to do right now as well is, I always say there's a 72-hour rule. So if you're listening to this panel, you have to pick 1 to 2 things you're going to do in the next 72 hours. Don't put it on a to-do list, because after 72 hours, it won't get done. And think about how you are either going to get more knowledgeable about how you can impact the inclusion and diversity, one action you want to take with your own teams, in your own company, whatever, because I love the notion of when you take your strengths, and I always say find your why, you can actually unleash some really powerful things because you have a sense of purpose, you have a sense of excitement about it, and a sense of value that you're bringing to it. So my thing is find your why, and in the next 72 hours, pick 2 things that you'll do to help make that inclusive sense of belonging, because it really will pay off in spades, and there's plenty of research on it.
Thank you. And Laurie.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I was going to say the same thing, Melissa, is know your why. So know what it is that is important to you, right? And understand what is intrinsically what motivates you. What is the, and for some of it is purpose. Some of it, it's the being really good at or mastering something. The other is having autonomy and like control over your own destiny. But know how those things index for yourself personally, and realize that this whole idea of bias, it really begins and ends with you, because it's really, you're the only one that you have that you're responsible for and accountable for, right? I mean, you can only influence others, of course, but it's really what you do that's going to determine how we start, and we do this collectively, how you start to break the bias, right? And so know your own biases, and mitigate those biases, or get them or kick them out, right? Whatever. Inspect often, because we are humans. We sort of snap back into those things, those old mindsets, right? It's hard to change a mindset, but it's not impossible. And then, so inspect often and be accountable for your own story, right? So this is you're the author, right? You hear this so often in so many different things, but you're the author of your own story. Make sure that you're writing the story that you want it to be, and actually a story that your kids would be proud of. Okay, I suppose I've got 4 children too, so sometimes it always kind of circles back to those kids, right? Anyway, but that's what I think that I would leave with everyone today.
Excellent, thank you. So there's no time like the present. We've all got biases. We need to identify them and manage them and take some action and really understand our why. So I would like to say an enormous thank you to each of our panelists today. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for watching. And if you'd like more information, then please don't hesitate to contact our panelists. I'm sure they'd be delighted to engage with you, or visit our website as well for more information. Thank you very much.